All right. Hey, folks, welcome back to Colonial Outcasts, the anti-imperialist podcast your uncle will hate. I'm kind of doing this little preface. I'm actually not involved in this episode, but I just wanted to say that past month's been crazy. Been a lot of fragmentation over the voting. You're going to vote for Harris and be tactical, or you're going to vote third party. We strive, being an anti-fascist platform, for ideological plurality. Never underestimate the left's ability to eat itself. So we want to resist that. This episode today features Mark Wayne and Wally Rashid. And Wally and Mark have two very different political viewpoints, but are still good friends and willing to have a conversation prioritizing Palestine and the ongoing genocide in Gaza. This is Colonial Outcasts, as we envision it, leading by example and normalizing solidarity in this movement across U.S. election lines and points of difference. So, Wally, Palestinian American. He's been doing very important work within the political structure of Washington to get settlements sanctioned. He has come out publicly for Kamala Harris. Let's disagree if we don't all agree, but let that be a normal function of activism instead of alienation. So this episode was actually recorded over a month ago, but hasn't been released due to the busy schedule of July. But it's actually beneficial that it worked out this way because since it was recorded, there's been a lot of contention in the movement regarding the election. So Wally and Mark have gone down two very different paths regarding candidates in this upcoming election, yet maintain admiration and friendship. And now I'm going to piss off, and y'all can listen to this awesome episode, which I totally recommend you do. Cheers, Greg out.
All right, our dear Colonial Outcast audience, it's very difficult to construct a statement which would describe the admiration we have for each and every one of you. For some elusive reason, destiny has beckoned an unruly hodgepodge of highly educated and passionate rebels such as you, rebels that would make the murderous Queen Elizabeth herself rise from the grave just to call the cops on you. And for that, we at Outcast are proud. I know so many of you are feeling emotionally and mentally exasperated over what you're seeing every day. The state of affairs at home and abroad is becoming more dire. The overlords are waxing more brazen in their greed and less concerned with public backlash as they flaunt their depravity through their actions and then excuse it through their political statements. This has led to an acceleration of horror in Gaza, Sudan, and the Congo, and economic struggle here in the States. Nonetheless, y'all are becoming more fervent, convicted, and determined to fight this corrupt system of power players and anybody who apologizes or shills for it. For that, I hold all of you in such high regard, and expressing this to you is in and of itself an avenue of therapy for me, because you haven't given up. And because of my deep admiration for all of you, I encourage you to keep your minds healthy, your emotional health tended to regularly by any means necessary, and utilize creativity when linking up with each other and thinking outside of the box for the sake of this revolution, which is in its infancy stage. For those of you who are missing Greg Stoker today, Greg has been providing desperately needed analysis for Mint Press, so I encourage all of you to keep Mint Press in your news diet. Greg did an interview with a Biden political appointee of the U.S. Interior Department, Miriam Hassanein, who quit over the obvious moral discrepancies with that administration. So go watch that. It's up on YouTube right now. And I encourage you guys to use Mint Press as a main source of news, as they are not at the behest of any corporate sponsors. That being said, this genocide in Gaza and this emergence of the Fourth Reich against the Palestinian people has put into perspective so many of the inner workings of empire, more than ever before. And it's hard to keep up with the emerging updates of this ongoing horror abroad and the brazen corruption, deception, and conspiracy against the average citizen here at home. Consequently, it's hard to organize our thoughts and figure out which absurdity we're going to tackle next. At least this is the conundrum I find myself in very often. It's in this vacuum of honesty and sanity, however, where voices among the non-elite can rise above the system's fog of duplicity so as to provide us with at least a few starting points of things we should be paying attention to. This is where talented influencers like Wally Rashid come in, Wally Rashid is a Palestinian-American entrepreneur, founder of Woodland Pulse, a store with wood grain and cedar essential oil-infused decor, The Aero Chronicles, a news outlet for the latest updates on flying cars, eVTOL aircraft, and urban air mobility markets, and the All of Peace Foundation, a nonprofit organization for uniting Palestinian organizations for greater impact. Wally's family resides in the village of Burin, which is in the Nablus Governorate. Burin is also in close proximity to one of the most violent and fanatical terrorist settlements known as the Yitzhar Israel. Championed by Ben Gvir himself, Yitzhar is setting fire to the olive groves and waging raids into the village. One incident that we had gone over in a previous episode with Wally was with a 9-year-old who was kidnapped and beaten within an inch of his life and dumped on the side of the road. That's just one of many examples that's happening in the West Bank, not just to Wally's family's village, but many villages. And today, we're going to be going into that. It might be a short episode, so we're going to be kind of focusing on the settler violence that Wally is so close to and familiar with, as his family is directly at stake. So, Wally, welcome, brother. It's good to have you back again. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. You've been doing good. You just have been. I guess how long ago did you finally launch the Aero Chronicles?
About a few months ago now. Yeah, so things are going really good. We hired somebody on, so I have a content writer for that. And yeah, things are going pretty well with that. Yeah, can't complain.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, the audience loved what you had to say the last few episodes. They loved hearing about your insight and your experiences and us having that kind of like cross interview format. But today, due to time and due to necessity, we need to talk about the settler violence that's happening in the West Bank. It's obviously been ongoing for years, but these past few months have been setting some landmarks, including one of the first drone strikes in military drone strikes in the West Bank by the IDF in the past 20 years, the first one ever. So not to mention other horrific strategies they're using, such as taking over the water supply, sabotaging the water supplies, um, all kinds of different forms of sabotage against the people in the West Bank, and it's getting more brazen. So, what can you tell me some of the updates from your family in Bourne?
Yeah, it's just things have been escalating every single day after more countries started to recognize the state of Palestine, especially over the past few months. For example, Spain, it really upset the prime ministers, and it actually expedited the level of build that they're doing in the settlements. So I've been noticing that the settlers now have even started to become more hostile in retaliation almost to what's happening on the international stage. So they're becoming a lot more emboldened. Recently now it's almost every day they'll come down in raids, they'll set fires, and prior to last year and every year before that it was still very hostile, and I would say maybe on like a bi-weekly, monthly basis. Now it's honestly almost every day. They're just coming down. The IDF will come sometimes, maybe stop them, maybe not. A lot of the times they are the IDF, so it's just one big gray area. A few weeks ago, they came and they lit, and I have some videos and photos I'll send you later. They came down and they just set fires all across the village. They set a car on fire. They just started shooting all over the village. So they're really emboldened to do whatever they'd like, and nobody's really stopping them. So that's this current situation, honestly, right now.
What do you attribute the emboldening of this? What is really kind of opening the floodgates for this type of violence?
I think that it's a mix of them being in fear of the fact that on the international stage they're losing credibility and they're losing support, and I think they realize that if they don't build settlements fast enough, they're going to be forced by the international community to withdraw and pull out. So I think because of that, they're expediting and they're trying to just like go as fast as they can to build settlements, which is leading to more violence. It's almost their way of just like really making sure that a Palestinian state never happens, trying to scare Palestinians to get out of the West Bank. So I think that, I mean, we can just look back in history. Things always, especially before a major change, things reach a tipping point. And I think, honestly, moving forward, this is just the beginning. Unfortunately, I think things are going to continue to get much worse than they're at now until there's an eventual tipping point. I think that's just, it seems like that's the clear trajectory that things are headed. So it's a mix of international response, and then also the prime ministers themselves. They've been having meetings with the mayors of these settlement towns, helping them with settlement building. They're becoming more emboldened because they all have ammunitions now, and they all have weaponry by the Israeli government. So Israel's pushing this initiative of settlement expansion, of land annexation, and the settlers feel like they actually have to support their country, and their religious belief allows them to continue doing this. So it's just a mix of all of those factors.
Yeah. I guess on that vein, the fanaticism, I guess the desperate fanaticism as part of these settlers that's ingrained in their actual religious practices is a factor in accelerating that violence. Obviously, the Yitzhar Israel, they are one of those cults that believe in the hailing in the Messianic era, correct?
Yep.
And so, like you said, that urgency to want to accelerate that plan with the pressure from the outside of Israel, the international pressure, is kind of putting them on this anxious level that, okay, we have a job to do to hail in the coming of the Messiah. So we got to get rid of these villages as much as possible. So the violence that they're doing, like setting the cars on fire, is that aside from them just being sadistic like that, are they also trying to drive them out? They're thinking that by upping the temperature of violence, that they're going to intimidate the villagers to actually willingly leave. Is that one of the reasons?
Yeah, it depends. So there are larger cities and towns, and then there are smaller villages. I would say Boudin is kind of in the middle between a town and a village. So so yes, they're always saying like, "Hey, leave, get out, go back to one of the Arab countries." But if you're going to like the boondocks villages that are less than maybe 500 people, what they're trying to do right now is all of these very tiny villages, they try to displace them to go to the bigger Palestinian villages, and they'll push them out. So if there's like a small like 20 family, because you have to realize like in the West Bank you're having a lot of those small little villages. What they'll do is they'll try to push out these small families, and they'll kick them out of the like more of the desert area and push them into small a little bit larger Palestinian towns. And what they're trying to do really is just form more enclaves. So even in Burin, there are houses near the mountainside, but what they're doing is they're like destroying the houses closest to them around the mountainside and just pushing people into smaller and smaller enclaves. And so the difference between Gaza and the West Bank is that if you look at a topographical map, I mean, Gaza's flat. Gaza's completely flat. It's right on the water. So physically, you can actually push Gaza. You can push the Palestinians in Gaza out. From north to south, you just keep pushing. And eventually, you can physically do that. If the army really wanted to, they can physically do that. We've seen that. They can't do that in the West Bank. The West Bank is all mountains. It's all mountains. So they know that. Israel knows that. The IDF knows that. And their plan has never been to push the Palestinians completely out of the West Bank, because that's physically impossible when you have mountain, over valley, over valley. So what their strategy is to put Palestinians in smaller enclaves. And that's why the settlements are all built on the mountaintops, because they're pushing the Palestinians into the valleys. So you have all of these settlements built on the mountaintops. I don't know if it happened after the last time we met or before, but they built a checkpoint now. They built two checkpoints in Boudin. So that means that if you live in Boudin and you want to go to Nablus, which is the closest city, some days you simply can't because they built a checkpoint on both sides of entry into the village. So that's what they're doing. They've been building more checkpoints in every village and putting them in smaller enclaves. And it's basically, we're headed toward the trajectory that it's going to end up looking like a South Africa Bantustan. It's becoming very reminiscent of South Africa apartheid. So the trajectory for this isn't good long term. What we're going to see is more Palestinian enclaves, less land, and more concentrated areas. And the population is growing. That's the thing. I think.
Yeah.
So, like, there's already 3 million Palestinians. That number's not going down. It's actually going up. Palestinians have some of the highest fertility rates in like global.
In all the Middle East.
Yeah.
In all the Middle East, they have the highest fertility
Yeah,
rates.
and it's just, there's a lot of cultural reasons for that. Israel kind of actually makes them want to have more babies in a way. So you're having a growing population that they're putting in smaller lands, in smaller enclaves, and there's more separation between the different valleys. Ultimately, what's Israel's long-term strategy? Whatever Israel's doing now, I have peace in knowing that what Israel's doing right now is going to ultimately shoot it in the foot. Israel would be a lot better off to just accept a two-state solution. This is not going to fare well for Israel, because ultimately, the more it reduces the prospects of a two-state solution, which has always felt like a pipe dream for a lot of people, the more naturally people are going to ask, okay, if it's not a two-state solution and Palestinians don't get a state, what's the alternative? And, so, yeah.
And you said they built two checkpoints. I don't remember if you had mentioned that in our last episode. I remember hearing something about checkpoints. I'll have to go back. But Nablus is a pivotal industrial center for the agricultural needs of Burin. So they need to get agricultural supplies from Nablus, correct? I mean, isn't that like a lifeline for Burin in many ways?
Yeah, and I'll send you I have a lot of photos and videos. I'll send you some of the new checkpoints that they built. It is. So right now, what they're currently doing is they'll have some like young guys in their 20s like go in a pickup truck and like go in the back ways, like through the trees and the olive trees to the next village to grab like milk and vegetables and fruit for the entire village. And they'll do this like every night or every other night, and they'll bring it into the village and give it to everybody in the community. My cousin, she got a job months ago, and then of course she had to quit again because she couldn't go there every day. It was in Nablus, and she's just one example of the many. So what we're also going to notice is that as what's happening right now continues, the Palestinian economy is going to weaken because they're cutting off access between different villages. So naturally, all these villages, they're going to stop. They're not going to have any income. The economy is going to weaken, while at the same time the settlements are growing. The divide is going to start to grow a lot more.
Yeah. It's horrifying when you think about it, because the more isolated these villages get, the more the settlers can get away with all kinds of untold horrors. Because you're not just talking about the isolation of supplies and logistics, you're also talking about potential isolation of communication, in the blink of an eye. And I know that the anxiety with the West Bank residents is just growing more and more by the day, especially when you talk about families with kids, and I always try to put myself in the shoes of West Bank families who have children. It's like, here in the United States, we have the luxury of being able to call 911 or emergency services, or having a gun to protect our own family. People in the West Bank, they don't have any of that. They're at the mercy of, okay, is the IDF going to show up to protect me? They're not. They're most likely going to facilitate a pogrom. And, but on the flip side, some level of hope I've seen on social media has been these human rights observers, these human rights watchers who are trying their best to insert themselves into the West Bank at all points. And they are having some level of success of staving off harassment. I've seen videos of that. The question is, how much of an impact is that having? It is like, would you say that more efforts, us supporting those efforts of human rights watchers inserting themselves in these monitors, is that making a noticeable impact in staving off the violence? What would you have to say?
I think that it is making an impact, but the impact is not as much in staving off the violence as it is raising awareness to the issue. Um,
Yeah.
I I don't mean sound like a pessimist because I'm very optimistic long term in the outcome, like much
No,
longer
be
term.
be, be
But
realistic.
I think that in the short term, I think that it's very important what they do because it's raising awareness, and that in of itself is very important because I think that the hostilities are going to escalate, and it's important that there are people
Mhm.
documenting those to the rest of the world. However, right
Yeah.
now, there's nobody in Israel that's able to actually stop them because they have government support. Right now, the
Yep.
biggest slap on the wrist that they can get is sanctions by the U.S. government. The State Department's been sanctioning some violent settlers. They actually released more sanctions today, and that cuts them off from using the U.S. financial system. I haven't actually, aside from being cut off from using the U.S. financial system, that's all it does. It cuts them off financially. Does that mean that it's going to stop them from committing violence? They still have their guns, they still have their rifle, they still have ammunitions. If anything, they might be
Yeah.
even more emboldened and upset because they're cut off from using their bank account. So, I think that the only way the violence will actually stop is if a third party gets in there, and I don't
Yeah.
see that happening, at least not right now.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah. No, I don't see it subsiding at all. As far as the violence or their motivations for behind the violence. Um, what I will say is that also these sanctions, and again, this is the pessimist in me, is that it's performative. I mean, yeah, okay, they cut off the bank account connected with US, but they can always just go to the next settlement over and use avenues there. There's so many loopholes around that stuff. It's all performative. It's all um theater for the politicians of the United States to say, like, okay, look, we'll do something about it. But now also there's the sabotage of the water supply that's currently happening in the West Bank. That's been ramping up even further since the last time we talked, right?
yeah. And this has been continuous. There have been so many stories of them tainting the water or adding, changing the water so that way sewage pipes are entering, or just having sewage pipes having sewage pipes open up into their agriculture. So they're really trying to think of everything that they can do now. And
Mm.
from all aspects, it's honestly becoming evil how much they've dehumanized them. Um, yeah, it's just it's becoming evil. I think that best efforts will should be geared towards more. I think more international awareness is going to bring the most effective uh, efforts to stop it. I don't because I don't see the U.S. right now, just given the current political climate. Aside from these sanctions, that's kind of the furthest the U.S. can go right now. That the U.S. will be willing to go. So I think that maybe the best bet for Israel to stop what it's doing is some sort of UN interference. But yeah, the water supplies it's becoming more tainted. They have less access to food. They're cut off from other they're cut off from other Palestinian villages. They're kind of stuck in their house right now. Whenever I speak to my family, they don't really do much every day. They're just kind of locked in their house.
Yeah. What has your family witnessed, I guess, in the past few weeks that has been uh, especially horrific that they've had to gone through? I mean, is it compared to when you and I were last talking?
Yeah, on the 4th of July, and again, I'll send you all of these images and photos or videos. On the 4th of July, about like 40 of them actually came down, and they set fires everywhere, and they started going into the closest houses, and they got into the closest houses, and they just beat the hell out of one of my family friends. They broke his jaw, completely bloody. Like they went into his house, grabbed him, and then they beat the hell out of him. And they beat the hell out of a few others like in that nearby. And yeah, I'll show you the videos of him as well. It's pretty sad. He's fine. I mean, like he's still alive. It's okay. But like that's where they're at right now. To where they're not. So it's not just like they're setting fires on the agriculture and kind of doing their thing. They're setting fires. They're coming down with their rifles. They'll go to the houses closest to the mountainside. They'll shoot the door down or just try to break in, and they'll kick them out. They'll do whatever they want. So that just happened on the 4th of July. And so that was yeah, that was very recent. A few weeks prior to that, I think in the second week of June, they came down and into my family's village, and they just lit a car on fire. They poured kerosene all over the inside, and they just set it off on fire, and then they just kind of go on their merry way back up to the settlement. Um, so my family's locked away. Tensions are rising just in general in the area. You know.
Yeah. How are you coping with all this? How is it affecting you?
I just work a lot. I'm doing what I can. I've been working. I'm looking. We'll see where things go with it. But I've been working with the State Department for a while now. I have a team of lawyers
Yeah.
actually working on. As much as I say, the sanctions are just a slap. Well, I mean, I'm just going to do whatever I can. So we've been working on a whole entire portfolio that we've already submitted to the State Department. They've been asking for more information. Um, I've been working with Dawn, Democracy for the Arab World now, and they've been helping draft these sanctioned nominations for Yitzhar. So we should be hearing back from the State Department in the next few weeks, actually, whether or not that settlement gets sanctioned. So I've been working a lot on that. My emotions are, that's kind of the most I can do, and then obviously my advocacy and talking on social media. I've been pretty good at being more action oriented than emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been just kind of doing everything I can. Um, yeah, just a lot of advocacy, reaching out, getting just the sanctions are kind of what I've been focused on, and seeing where we can build from there. Become a lot more political recently, just trying to mobilize in the best direction. That's been a bit of a struggle for me, but yeah, just a lot of work.
How has that journey been though? Like in working with the political aspect of it with the State Department, what's it? Walk us through that
Yeah.
if you don't mind.
Well, I guess with the State Department, that I put together. This was way back in April. I put together with like a couple lawyers, like a 30-page document, very professionally written and everything, calling for sanctioned nominations. I spent months prior to that, or just like a couple months prior to that, working with NGOs in Israel. One of them is called B'Tselem, and then another one is Yishten, that focused on settler violence documenting. So basically what I did is I put together a 30-page report with lawyers on specific, because with these settler sanctions, you actually have to write down the names of the specific individuals and show evidence. It has to be very evidence-based and factual. So I've just been culminating a lot of that. We submitted it. They got back to me within about a couple weeks. They said that they'll review it. That took about 6 weeks. They got back to me a couple weeks ago asking for more information, reached out to my family, and I actually had them conduct interviews with the parents and siblings of Mu'taz and Sur'id, the two boys that were killed in the West Bank. So we were able to get all of that video footage and documentation and interviews. We sent it back to the State Department just last week, and that's where we're at right now. Dawn, Democracy for the Arab World Now. I started like a small partnership with them, and they were able to. They're also submitting sanction nominations for Yitzhar in supplement to what I already sent. They'll be sending that nomination out next week. So I actually am. I mean, we'll see. Fingers crossed. I actually am feeling pretty hopeful about that. Yeah, go ahead.
No. Keep going.
Yeah, so that's kind of where we're at with that. I actually am feeling hopeful because I think the amount of evidence we have is so strong. So I am feeling hopeful about those sanctions. What I am worried about is what will happen if and after the sanctions are placed. I don't think it will actually stop the violence. I want to do it anyways, simply because of the fact that that's the only thing at my disposal, so I want to take it. But will that escalate violence? What are the effects of that going to be? I'm not sure. But regardless, that's kind of been the process there. Yeah, I think that again, a lot of my efforts focus more on strategy. My brain is very analytical. I'm really not that emotional. I'm very like just data driven. And I've just been focusing on trying to put together a better strategy for the path forward and with other like-minded people right now. Yeah.
Which is what I love about you, honestly, man, because your take, I think in our last podcast we did about economic solutions for Palestine and how we can view Palestine under the lens of it is a potential economic powerhouse, and we need to empower the Palestinians for that. It's a multi-front war. Like the war for the liberation of Palestine, it has to come from so many avenues. It has to be, political. It has to be physical. It has to be in the media sphere, but also has to be economics. Economics plays a powerful role. Obviously, the only way that the West Bank is even able to survive, even just as little as it is struggling to survive, is through economics. I don't know how they do it. For me, the resilience of the West Bank has always been inspiring to me. It reminds me of Cuba. Cuba has had to deal with decades of embargo and sanctions for no fucking reason. It's just the State Department and the United States being a dick. But yet the Cubans have been able to make the best out of it by being so resourceful and industrial minded to make it work. And which is why Cuba is such a unique society. I noticed that similar spirit in the West Bank when I was there, and I'm sure you noticed it. This like just the way that they have to think outside the box to even survive, given the economic restrictions that Israel places on the West Bank. So, but like you mentioned, Palestine, it can be such an asset to the world economically. It can be such an asset for all kinds of innovation and manpower that we need to tap into as part of the fight for its liberation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that what I always try to remind people is that right now what's going on is it's tough because there's two different initiatives you have to focus on, immediate needs and long-term needs. And in the West Bank and Gaza right now, especially, there are immediate needs that take priority. The immediate needs of, in Gaza, humanitarian aid, immediate ceasefire. Those are immediate needs, but they're not state built. They're not state building initiatives. In the West Bank, an end to the violence that's ongoing as quickly as possible. That's an immediate need, but it's not a state building initiative, which is focused not on stopping the violence, but actually on developing a state and developing sovereignty. And I think that that's a lot more. It's of course more difficult, and it's more difficult for a couple of reasons. One is because of the amount of steps and the amount of mobilization as a community needed to make that happen and to push that forward. And then two, it's also because you actually have to have people believe that it's possible. And I've noticed that right now, a lot of my focus is more so on the second, more long-term initiatives to actually create a Palestinian state and to create Palestinian sovereignty. And what I've noticed is that with that sort of initiative, it takes a long-term strategy, and it's not something that's going to happen in a year or in 5 years even. And uh, putting together that strategy with individuals and actually sticking to it, and then also having people believe that it's possible is a lot more. It's a lot more difficult. Um, so yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that. Yeah.
But what are the most tangible ones that you've seen?
So
So far?
yeah, so right now I'm focused a lot more on the sanctions, and then what I think would be the best path forward is honestly once America is to have more freedom away from Israeli interests, then I think that is naturally going to end up benefiting the Palestinian people. I think that it's in America's interest in the region would actually be to have more amicable policies towards Palestinians, because it's going to lead to more peace in the Middle East. But unfortunately, um, American politicians are so bought out by the Israel lobby that the U.S. policies in the Middle East are so one-sided. So I think that what is possible right now is, one, just using these sanctions, but also to really help Palestine, you also need to help separate Israeli influence in America. So that's why I was initially really supporting Jamal Bowman. I think right now, and I've actually been wanting to talk to El Shabaka is a Palestinian policy organization. They put together these really awesome policy reports, and I've met with them previously. But you know how there was like everybody's kind of talking about Project 2025 and all this. It's Project 2025. 2025. It's like a 900 some page project like plan of how they want to completely change the government. And I was talking to some policy analysts, and I was like, well, why don't we put together, a Palestine initiative of a 5 year plan or whatever else to actually focus on pushing for a Palestinian state, like really get some policy analysts together and put together a whole game plan, because I really don't see any strategy right now I don't think that the efforts that are being pushed, I think that the strategy can be improved, I think is a better way to say it. So for more immediate things, there are so many amazing people in the movement that are doing incredible things. I think that more unity among all of the different initiatives would be something that we could do immediately, and then actually putting together a group of policy analysts and individuals together and being like, okay, let's create a 5 year strategy, taking into account where we're at realistically and moving from there. So that's why I started my nonprofit, the Olive Peace Foundation. It's really just focused right now on uniting Palestinian organizations. So we're just taking on different Palestinian organizations, taking them on as members right now, just to create a more cohesive movement that's taking actions in a strategic way. And there's so many amazing individuals and so many amazing organizations that are working on the Palestinian initiative. I think that what will bring the Palestinian initiative to another level and really catapult us for better change is by uniting all of those efforts. So that's what's my immediate step forward right now, is strengthening Olive Peace, creating more unity among the movement, and then working especially with analysts and people that can really look at the data and be like, okay, this is going to be the best path forward for what we're trying to achieve. And I would hope that would be self-determination, an end to the occupation, and all of those things that we want. Those aren't going to happen overnight. And I think people also need to recognize that it's not just going to be one person either. It's a community effort. So you really have to try to get a community on board with one initiative and move forward in that way. So so immediate things that can be done is just uniting the movement more, and then actually putting together a formal trajectory of where we're trying to go. I think that is what I've noticed could be improved on a bit more, especially when it comes to U.S. policy and actually thinking about how we're going to be able to impact that in the best way, both for America and for Palestine, by the way, because I really think that there are some policies in America being placed that are pro-Israel that are really not benefiting in America. And I think that
none of them
yeah,
are. None of them are beneficial for America. Yeah, I think you made a great point last episode about how if we would have been patronizing the Palestinian economy over Israel, we would be in a much better place on the world stage, like internet, at the very least politically, but also economically, because the main economical benefit we've gotten from Israel is only the weapons industries. When you really think about it, that's Israel's main relationship with us is their investment into military technology. Oh, great. That benefits Americans. The fuck do we need that for? But you talk about Palestine, like agriculturally, and just the talent you see in Palestine. The collective industrial intelligence of Palestinians is phenomenal, simply because of what they've had to gone through in the past 75 years. They had to think outside the box when it comes to industry. And that is a talent that you cannot buy with money. It only comes with experience. It only comes with hardship. And the Palestinians have that. So, yeah, anyways.
No, I completely I completely agree. Yeah, I completely agree. So those would really be the best initiatives, is just, positively impacting U.S. policy in that way. But that in of itself is a whole. There's so many small steps that that have to be done in order to make that happen. Especially now, what we're noticing is that it's the Israel lobby. I don't think I think it's actually gotten stronger. I think that more public awareness has been raised about what's going on and how the system is currently being operated, but I don't think it's actually weakened them right now. I mean, I think they've won every politician they've backed in these recent races. So
Which is why it only affirms my anarchy. Like the more I see our political system just failing time and like one after the other, despite the public disapproval of our politicians, just to me, I'm at the point, and I by the way, I say this while also supporting your political efforts. By the way, I don't mean this to
I understand.
diminish what you do. Because here's the thing, I might be wrong. Like my lack of motivation in the political sphere or any hope, and my cynicism towards our politics, and I'm willing to accept that it may be misplaced, and I don't want it to cancel out or diminish anybody else's political efforts. But while that being said, okay, let's say hypothetically it continues to just there's no movement forward for Palestine in the United States political arena at all. Like if it is, it's all just formative, or theatrical. Let's do worst case scenario here for a second. There's no movement politically in the United States. There's no progress made for Israel's stranglehold on the West Bank. What do you see as the next step? What do you see as the next avenue of approach to this?
I think that where we're headed is the West Bank becoming more and more segmented and looking like South Africa, Bantustan, so just very, very small enclaves. And I think the violence is going to increase. That's where we're headed. Based on, if things don't go unchanged, that's the current trajectory. So we're going to see the settlements grow, and we're going to see the violence escalate, and we're going to see more annexation in the West Bank. In Gaza, I think that I don't actually think they're going to, well, who knows, things can change overnight. I don't think that they're going to actually be pushed out of Gaza into Egypt at this point. I think what we're going to see is continued military presence of Israel in Gaza, and again, more segmentation in different parts of Gaza and just full occupation there. And we'll have some violent settlers start to build outposts there over the next 5 years. I think that that's going to continue to escalate, and the international community is going to further isolate Israel until it reaches a tipping point. I'm not sure when that tipping point is going to be, but there is peace in knowing that Israel's strategy is really going to backfire, because Israel's main goal in the West Bank is to de facto annex the entire West Bank. So they don't want to actually annex the entire thing like 100%, because if they do that, then they have 3 million people that are Palestinians living in Israel, but they don't have Israeli citizenship if they took the whole thing. So that's textbook definition apartheid, and they can't go there. So what they're trying to do instead is probably annex like 80% of it, and then have small little circles that look like Native American reservations. And they'll say, oh, these are like Palestinian. So they're Palestinians have sovereignty in those regions, and that's not going to end up faring well, because eventually these small little segmented populations are just going to become so poor, and the violence is going to escalate until there will eventually have to be there will have to be a point that these people are eventually given equal rights. I'm not sure when that will happen, but I can't imagine any country will be able to last for 100 years when 3 million people residing within the territory of that country don't have equal rights and are consistently under an occupation. What country in history is able to last indefinitely when a third of its population don't have equal rights? It's just not possible. It's not feasible for Israel. And it's not going to be the United States that stops Israel. It's going to be the rest of the international community, because right now the United States is the policies in the United States and the political climate are not going to benefit Palestinians in the short term whatsoever. So I think that that's where it's going to be, where things are headed. And that's why I say it's really in Israel's best interest to accept a two-state solution and withdraw the settlements, because at least there still will remain in Israel if they do that. If Israel has to eventually absorb 3 million Palestinians, that's completely changing the demographics within Israel. If it absorbs all the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, it no longer becomes a Jewish majority state. There would be more Palestinians than there are Israelis living there. So imagine what that does to voting and policy in Israel, and how quickly that's just going to change Israel. So I think that's where we're headed. I think we're going to see more loss of life, especially in the West Bank. I think the West Bank is going to have, I think the chances of a third intifada increase day by day.
Yeah, I've been seeing the writing on the wall too. Obviously, if violence is only going to get worse for residents of the West Bank, and there's going to be a lot more, I think, official military movements inside the West Bank. I mean, we saw the first drone attack in 20 years in the West Bank, and so I think that was a precedent that they just left to now normalize possible, actual heavy equipment, um, aerial bombardment of the West Bank. Like, one of my worst fears is that the Israeli Air Force is going to get involved in the West Bank and start attacking. And we know that there are resistance groups in the West Bank. Obviously Palestinians don't want to be defenseless, so there is an actual underground arms industry within the West Bank. I've heard that a lot of Israeli weapons have gone missing, and they suspect that it is gone to resistance movements within the West Bank for their protection, which, hey, I'd be doing the same thing. But that also might be used as an excuse. Israel will use that as an excuse to attack the West Bank militarily in a lot more heavy-handed way than they are doing now. I feel like now they're just doing probes. And, like we've seen these incursions, like what was the incursion into Bethlehem that happened a few months ago? The military incursion into Bethlehem?
I'm not. There were so many. I don't know the exact one you're referring to.
I know we're losing. I know there's so many that are happening, but there was a particular incursion into Bethlehem by the IDF, and I saw that as an omen of what might be to come. As you know, Bethlehem is a very symbolic city in the West Bank for Christians and Muslims. So I really saw that attack as being Israel's way of saying, hey, here's what's going to come. So brace for it, just to instill fear and to normalize it. So, I like you said, I have very, it's looking very grim for residents of the West Bank. But then that leads to the conversation about Hezbollah. Hezbollah's conflict with Israel also is the result of that is a lot of Israelis leaving the country. So the question is, what impact is this conflict with Hezbollah that's happening right now? What impact is that going to have on Israeli society, as far as how many Israelis, including the settlers, are going to leave? Just voluntarily out of sheer fear, because we know that the Israelis are fucking,
Yeah,
they're they're bitches.
I mean,
When it comes
I don't
to
know how
it,
many settlements, how many they've evacuated so much of Israel's north. I don't know the exact number, but I know thousands. I remember it's in the thousands. I don't remember the exact number of Israeli civilians that have been evacuated from the north. And right now, I don't. So it really just depends because again, things can change overnight. It's not in Israel's best interest to go to war with Hezbollah right now. It
Of
not
course.
at all right now because right now, and an Israeli aide actually just recently said this. An Israeli one of the prime minister's aides, they said right now they are so the weapons that the United States is sending them right now, they're not using all of them. They're stockpiling a decent amount, and they're doing that because they don't want to be put in a position where the United States can blackmail. They use the word blackmail in the article I was reading, but they don't want to be put in a position where if Israel decides to go too far, the United States can just withhold munitions, and Israel won't be able to continue. So Israel's actively stockpiling weapons that the United States is sending. It's using a lot on Gaza, and then it's also stockpiling a decent amount. So that way, within a couple of years or so, if Israel decides to go to war with Hezbollah, it has the munitions, and the United States won't be able to use to basically withdraw support and have Israel retreat. That's Israel's strategy right now, that they're trying to become more effective. However, things can change. At the same time, Hezbollah is a lot stronger than it was in 2006. In 2006, it won as
Yeah.
well. So uh, I think the possibility. Hezbollah is not Hamas whatsoever. They have a lot better military capabilities.
Yeah.
So I'm not really. It's by far. So it's yeah, I mean, honestly, it really just depends, especially because Israel's so isolated on the international stage that any action Israel takes, especially if it tries to take land from southern Lebanon, I really don't know how that the international community is going to respond to that. I think it's so we'll see. Um, yeah, we'll see, but it's definitely leading to a lot of evacuations from the north. And I think if things continue this way, then yeah, we will begin to see a lot more Israelis leave as well. I have to look. I don't know the exact numbers of how many people have left since October 7th versus how many people have moved in.
I think Israel's hiding those numbers, and my angle of thought when it comes to the conflict with Hezbollah and Israel is, besides the obvious fact that Hezbollah would crush Israel in a matter of hours because of the sheer amount of
You think so?
long range missiles. I do, because of the simple. It's just military logistics. Hezbollah has long range missiles. Official numbers are 150,000. And the technological capabilities of Hezbollah, as you mentioned, they far exceed Hamas's. And we've seen how Hamas's has been able to handle Israelis in Gaza under the most excruciating wartime siege conditions. And the fact that their tunnel system of Hezbollah is far more sophisticated than Hamas's. And we've covered on this podcast, we've done military analysis with Travis and Greg into more detail about this, about the dire situation Israel's in with Hezbollah. We've broken it down, all the military ins and outs when it comes to Hezbollah. So the only question is, will Hezbollah pull the trigger? That's the only question. If Hezbollah decides to pull the trigger, Israel's crushed. I don't know if they are. I don't know if Hezbollah is going to make that move, but I do know that they could crush Israel in an instant. And all military analysis points to that. Like, American former generals have even said that. There's been plenty of talking heads that are experts in that arena, including Greg Stoker and Travis, ones on our podcast. So I have no doubt that Hezbollah is more than capable of crushing Israel, but I'm not approaching that angle necessarily in my head right now. I'm approaching the angle of psychology. Even the specter of Hezbollah launching an attack, a large scale attack against Israel, is enough psychologically to get Israelis packing their bags in the droves. And I think that Israel is hiding the numbers of people who are leaving right now. And I think the only reason why they're not, the main reason for that is because they don't want other Israelis to fully grasp the scope of this mass migration out of Israel. You know what I mean? Because it could lead to a cascading effect if Israelis start to get this impression, oh shit, my neighbors are leaving. Oh shit, that if they get the impression that their fellow citizens are leaving the country as well, they are going to want to pack their bags. It's just that, it's that domino effect that happens. So that's always been my train of thought is psychologically is all of Hezbollah has to do is spook Israel. It doesn't necessarily even have to launch a full scale attack. If it spooks Israel enough, the society there will just panic because they have it so comfy. They really do have it comfy compared to the Palestinians, and they've had this false sense of confidence over their military capability for years. And when you have a false sense of confidence, all it takes is a little punch in the nose to shatter that confidence, and then you're panicking. Whereas, the Palestinians, they've been punched in the nose time and time again, which is why they're so resilient. They don't spook easily, at all. So, anyways, it's just that's the line of thinking that I analyze this situation when it comes to Israeli society is the fact that they are easily spooked. Now that false sense of confidence has been shattered in many ways, and it's just a matter of time. Now, I'll getting back to the West Bank. I do want to end on somewhat of a good note that we pointed out last episode. We talked, I believe, we covered the Intel building a factory.
Oh yeah,
in Israel, and
they stopped doing that.
Not happening anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to go into that little small victory out of
no, it was great. I don't know if it's they completely cut it or if they just put a pause with no end date. But I think that it wasn't in their best interest just because of the political climate and everything that's going on there. So that was good to see. We'll see like the law, and it's also just because the region is so tense right now that nobody has any idea what could happen. Honestly, it could just be like one strike in the wrong direction, Hezbollah, Hamas, whatever, that completely changes the landscape. But yeah, that was pretty. That was it was nice to see.
Yeah, I mean, and when I was kind of thinking about it, and I'm like, yeah, like no shit. Imagine what do you think the insurance policy would be on an Intel
I have no idea because it was only miles away from Gaza. So I have no that's also makes no idea. Like it's literally just miles away, and I feel like for Hamas, I could see that being just like a major target down the road, wouldn't you? Like, I mean, if it's that, like, it just kind of makes sense. Like, it's just a logistical target. I just don't think it made sense. But yeah, so it's nice that kind of that halted for the time being.
Do you think that's an omen of the type of the way things will go for Israel when it comes to outside investment? Because Intel has very close ties with Israel. They've been lockstep in supporting Israel's policies all the way. But even with all that solidarity, economic solidarity that Intel has with Israel, it's still pulled out. And I was just thinking about it. Well, I don't think that it's just the fact that that facility would have been in some type of danger from an outside attack. I also think that it has to do with their analysts seeing Israeli society break down the way it is and just not having confidence in Israeli workers. I mean, you see how psychotic so a large section of the population in Israel is. That alone is a risk because it's not so much Hamas or Hezbollah or any outside, threat, existential threat. It's also just the Israeli citizens themselves being unstable psychologically. So that leads to all kinds of logistical problems. If Israeli society decides, if they have a civil war, for example, which a lot of people are saying that Israel, the possibility for a civil war in Israel is it's higher than ever.
Oh, you think so?
That also is yeah. I mean, we did 2 episodes on the likelihood of a civil war within Israeli society, and psychologists can break this type of thing down and explain why. But, long story short, if because the high risk of civil war within Israel is so high, that also could have been a factor in why Intel decided not to build there. It's
Absolutely.
just something.
It all comes down to
but
money. I mean, like if the settler colonial project isn't going to be financially isn't working financially, then they'll pull out. It all really just comes down to, is this actually like financially beneficial? And I think the more that it becomes difficult to be so, then we're going to start to see a lot of change happen.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah, exactly. I agree. Well, I mean, we covered West Bank in some depth. There's plenty more to cover with that, but I know you're short on time. I mean, on any lighter note, I did get your one of your my dog chewed it. It got I bought this months ago as a gift for my wife because she's been getting into plants lately. Like I've always been into plants, and she used to make fun of me for being so much into like horticulture and gardening, and then she started going through this phase. She's going through this phase now where she's super into like potting and pottery and plants and flowers and stuff. So I bought her this, and I didn't even get a chance to like put a flower or a plant in here, and my freaking golden retriever got
Oh
to
my
it,
gosh.
and it got torn
I'll
up.
send you
But
I'll send you a replacement. I'm sorry about that. Sucks. I'll send you a replacement soon.
No, it's all good.
Appreciate
No, no, it's I was checking out your store. It's really kind of, I like the styles that you. What is like what? So this is 3D printed.
No, no. Yeah. So we 3D print them. We're actually having a huge shift. So you were mentioning like cedar oil infused plant pots, and that's honestly become such a small aspect of where we're kind of headed. But right now, I have a factory of. I'm actually looking at like 45 3D printers in front of me. I have a ton of 3D printers, and we 3D print them out of like a wood corn byproduct. So that's kind of why they have a little bit of like a grainy feel and look to them. Um,
Oh, is that what it's made out of?
yeah, it's like a wood corn mixture.
It. Oh, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
so it's fully recyclable. And we started doing that like a year ago. Initially, I just started selling on Amazon, and I had like one 3D printer, and then I just kept buying more, and now I have a whole warehouse full of them. But now we're kind of transitioning completely. We like if you go on the website now, we have a ton of different products. Like we're selling grow lights and soil, and we just started selling outdoor furniture. So I'm trying to make it more of a home and garden marketplace. So we also sell live plants now. We work with a third party greenhouse. The plant pots, I want it to be one very very small aspect of everything. And quite honestly, as I've grown my personal platform and as I've just started my media site, I'm really kind of headed in the trajectory of I don't want to own anything physical. So I really kind of want to get out of this warehouse and go completely online marketplace. That's kind of where I'm headed. But yeah, so it just started off selling these plant pots, and we're growing really quickly. I'm really happy with the trajectory of things. I started off making those designs. I still do. But I'm trying to find some injection.
You designed that?
Yeah, I designed them. Yeah, so it was cool. It's fun trying to find some injection molding factory to just like to do them for me, so I don't need to handle any of the manufacturing. But it's been a really fun ride with the company. So it's been fun. I've made a lot of mistakes, which I'm really grateful for, because it's made my second media site that I'm starting a lot more smooth sailing, because I'm not making a million mistakes like I did the first time around.
Yeah, I know how that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead.
What inspired you for to do home and gardens? What was why that?
What did I do? In the middle of COVID, rare plants were like were really trendy, and I bought like I bought a plant cutting for like $250, and it was literally just a small like leaf cutting, and it was just a mutated plant. I got super into it. You're gonna think I'm a little bit crazy, but I'm really really science based. And I got obsessed with the plant because the reason it's a Monstera albo, so it's just like a normal plant, but it has parts of it is white. And I got obsessed with the fact that it was white. And I was trying to, I was in med school at the time, and I started doing research on the plant's DNA, and I was like, and I wanted to see if there was a way I could figure out to mutate these plants on my own. Just like bear with me for a second.
No way.
So I put together a whole entire like research report on how to like genetically modify plants to make them albino by like mutating their chlorophyll. And I put together this like 10-page document, and I go to the president of my med school because I was really close with him. I was like, hey, I think I figured out a way to like mutate these plants. I just need access to like a nuclear reactor. Hear me out. Like it's so I tell him everything. I'm like, I want to blast. This is kind of how my company started actually. I told him I was like, I want to blast 10,000 Monstera seeds with nuclear radiation, and I want to make some albino because I was reading some research reports from China, and they were doing that, and they had a 3% success rate, which is really good for what I'm trying, like for, because when you're using nuclear radiation, you're just basically blasting all the DNA. It's not specific, so you're just hoping it like fucks up part of the DNA that you want it to. Anyways,
yeah.
He connected me with a guy at NASA, the president of my med school, that has access to the University of Maryland has a nuclear reactor on site. They have a small one, so that he connected me to a nuclear engineer at NASA that actually works out of that nuclear reactor, and they got me access to the nuclear reactor, and I blasted 10,000 seeds with radiation, and I grew them in my apartment, and I was able to actually like successfully mutate a ton. So that, and from that, the med school gave me a $10,000, or sorry, not $10,000. It was like $9,000 something dollar, just like a $9,000, basically, just like not even a loan. They just gave it to me because I won some business competition through the med school. They linked me up to the business school, and that kind of kickstarted my company. And then I started selling plants online using that money. And I started growing a greenhouse, and then I was like, oh, well, I want to, sell these plants with a really cool plant pot. I couldn't find any plant pots that I liked, but then I saw a company in Europe, and they were 3D printing some, and I was like, okay, well, I want to try to do that. So I bought a 3D printer, and I just figured out how to operate it. I started off with one, and then I bought another, and then I bought another, and I really just started building up my website. We started kickstarting things on Amazon. And then I started noticing I was making more sales selling the plant pots than I was the plants, and they required less care and nurture. So then I completely just like geared and shifted all my efforts to plant pots. That really started to take off. Actress Alyssa Milano, do you know her? I don't know if she's, I can't remember what TV show she was on, but she found my products, and she randomly ended up just like partnering with my company. She started like selling my plant pots on her site. And then I started 3D printing vases, and now where we're at is we have these planters, vases, and then now I'm trying to shift completely, and I basically want to become the Amazon of home and garden. So I don't want to have a 3D printing factory anymore. I honestly just want to get rid of them. I don't want to do anything physical, and I want to completely shift to having a marketplace of specifically home and garden products. I've developed my website a lot, so my website has really good standing on Google. So I've partnered with, like, especially my website's blog. We're getting a lot of, like, thousands of monthly visitors to my website. So I've partnered with, like, Redfin Real Estate Company. Yeah, they've worked with me on, like, a couple of blog posts. So now what I'm really shifting to is just a digital online marketplace selling home and garden products. So that's kind of the trajectory my business has went. It's called Woodland Pulse right now. I'm shortening the name to Woodpulse, woodpulse.com soon. Just to really, like, two-word names are catchier. They're easier to remember. But that's the trajectory we're headed with my current business. Is I want to see a very large online marketplace for home and garden products, and maybe expand in that way. That's kind of my mindset. The only thing I'm figuring out and brainstorming right now is that Amazon has done such a good job at making it so difficult. It's just making it so everybody wants to just purchase on Amazon because it's so easy. So because of that, online businesses, they're really competing. It's so you get your products right the next day from Amazon, and it's typically very, very cheap because you're getting it from China. So online businesses like me have to compete with that. So right now, what I'm just really focused on is what is what can my website offer that Amazon can't, that's going to compel people to really to want to purchase from me. So that's kind of like what we're focusing on. So I'm really just focusing on developing that aspect to have something that my company offers that Amazon doesn't. But anyways, where I want to head is I want to make this an online marketplace, and I want to start selling furniture too. I want to start selling couches. I want to start selling whatever else, and just sell a lot of other manufacturers' products. So I'm hoping to do that within the next year. Like I mean, we already started. I have partnerships with 2 greenhouses, one in California, one in Florida. So if you go on my website now, we sell a ton of different, like thousands of different live plants. You can get a live plant mailed to your house. Um, and yeah, that's a rant, but that's where I'm at with that business.
You totally fucked my brain in the past 5 minutes. Hold on a second. It's gonna take a long time for me to digest what you just said. In medical school, nuclear reactor, blasting plants to make them albino, partnering with Milano.
Alyssa
Milano. Dude, what? This is what I'm talking about with Palestinians, dude. Y'all need to calm down, dude, with your thinking. Like, seriously, bro. You guys are out of control, bro. That's insane, dude. That is so. What's funny is I got my associate's degree from University of Maryland.
Oh, really?
That's funny.
That's funny.
Yeah, like years ago. Yeah, it was a satellite school when I was in South Korea. I'm gonna like sit on that out of everything you just said and try to process it, and I'm gonna come up with some type of response for what you just said. But that's freaking insane, dude. I mean, that's just so awesome, bro. Like, does your audience know about any of these details that you just laid out?
No, not really. I have my, like, on my Instagram bio, I have, like, the handles to my other businesses, but I never really, like, no, not really. Maybe in like a TikTok I've made like a couple years ago, I might have like mentioned something. Sometimes I'll mention, I'll show my products, but that's kind of where I stop. I never really talked about much else.
Jesus Christ, do you realize what you just said though in the past 5 minutes? Like, do you fully understand what you just said? Like everything that you just said, have you digested it within yourself, like introspectively at all? That was insane.
Yeah, it was kind of fun.
That's insane, dude. Like,
I'm really crazy, honestly.
Dude, you blow my mind. You literally blow my fucking mind, bro. Like, I don't think you fully realize it. Maybe this is the first time you've heard of like an outside opinion telling you that. I don't fucking know,
No.
but I don't think you fully.
No,
I don't think you fully processed. I don't think you fully processed what you've accomplished, bro. So
I appreciate it.
Jesus.
I don't know.
That's insane.
I don't know. It's been fun.
It's been fun. It's been fun. That's what you have to say for what you just accomplished. Oh, it's been fun. The fuck? Jesus Christ, bro.
Everything I do, because I dropped out of med school. I was halfway through. I was a little bit more than halfway through, and then I started.
I remember that.
Yeah, and I started my company, and I dropped out. And I was doing research at Stanford at the time. I was doing medical research there, and the one thing I'm so grateful for is that my background in medical research, I think I prioritize that over my knowledge of the human body and medicine, because the ability to do scientific research has affected every aspect of my life now, including the videos that I make. A lot of it, like really being data focused and data driven, with my businesses, really just using the scientific method. I'm like, that's the best skill I've developed. So the way I approach my life now is really just kind of like putting together the reports. For example, the one that I sent to the State Department regarding Yitzhar, I use the same formatting I do for all of the medical publications I've published. So I'm like really happy for that skill set. But no, and then also I just have crazy. My imagination is like borderline, not actually schizo, but I have a pretty vivid imagination, and sometimes I just ride with it. So that's kind of what I get thrown into some weird ass situations because of
that. Some weird ass situations. Oh my God, bro. You never cease to amaze me, bro. Every time I hear about like your life story and what you've done, dude, it blows my mind, bro. Jesus Christ. Thank God Colonial Outcasts was the one to capture everything that you just said. That's a huge feather we can put on our hat. Jesus Christ. Oh man, that's awesome, bro. I fully support you, and like I said, you're an inspiration. Like your angle of approach to Palestine, like you're thinking outside the box, your creativity, and your industrial attitude is it's definitely lacking in this movement. It's definitely lacking in the conversation concerning Palestine. And yeah, bro. We're all behind you. I mean, it's hard to ignore your charisma. There's a lot I wanted to talk to you about. We'll do that some other time, when you have more time on your hands. I definitely want to go into a lot of the videos that you've made, your content. George Bush Senior's attempted assassination by the Mossad. Cannot wait to talk to you about that one
Yeah.
at some point. But yeah, brother. Well, look, thanks for coming on, man. And I appreciate everything you're doing. I appreciate all the content you make and educating people and giving them a starting point to dive into little niche topics that and factoids that not a lot of people are privy to. So you make it very digestible. And I'm going to buy more stuff from your store. I'm going to take a look at your store. I'm super into plants. And thank God my wife is going through this phase, so me and her can start engaging in this stuff together. So awesome, brother. Well, with that, I'm gonna end the recording. um Everybody, I appreciate all your motivation and sticking with the goals in liberating Palestine despite the bad news that we're constantly seeing. For those of you who are religious, keep your prayers up for obviously, obviously the victims of this genocide in Gaza, but also the residents of the West Bank, who Wally Rashid is very closely associated with, and it means a lot to him that we support him in his endeavors and his political and business endeavors. So, and it's good to support each other, because one of the weapons we have at our disposal is patronizing each other's businesses throughout this revolution. It's one of the key ingredients that you cannot leave out of a revolution. So that being said, God bless y'all, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.